This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
So if we begin making these adaptations one step at a time, we are also what I call priming the pump, getting better at adapting behaviors now for women, because that's where the dollars are. Might as well start where the dollars are, but also for all the other diverse donors in our portfolio. African Americans are giving and have been for a long time, but they give differently. Latinas, Hispanics, Asian Americans, the wide diversity of donors all deserve our attention in new and adapted ways.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Kathleen Lair, expert in women's philanthropy and nonprofit leadership coaching. She's also a senior consultant at the Aspen Leadership Group. Hello, Kathleen. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
It is great to be here, Jen.
Yes, I know we've talked before, and your book is ready to be packed in my suitcase. I've been working my way through it, Gender Matters, A Guide to Growing Women's Philanthropy. And I'm wondering, what prompted you to take the long, lonely journey of writing a book about women's philanthropy?
What a great question. I wouldn't say it was lonely, actually. It was more creative than I would have anticipated. But what prompted me is a good story. I was speaking in front of a conference that really, in the audience, were primarily girls' schools. And I'd been speaking for quite some time, as you know, since 2005 on women's philanthropy. So I said, here's a group that's really going to get it. And yet I noticed as I was speaking, they were taking down furiously notes about the suggestions I was making about the research and the implications in fundraising. And they came up to me afterwards and said, many of them were all saying, Kathleen, we get it. We get that women give differently. So what do we do differently? And I thought to myself, well, at this point, if it's the women's schools, the girls' schools that are asking how we do fundraising differently, then I need to make sure that I'm paying attention to its fundraising behaviors that are getting in our way, not that we don't know that women give. And that's where the whole book came from. How do we set up a book where people can see that how we've been so far has just been a mismatch between how we fundraise and what resonates with women. No shame, no blame, it just is. So now we get to wake up. And I wrote the book in lots and lots of examples so people could see themselves or pick ideas out or begin to start adapting the fundraising behaviors to more deeply resonate with women who actually care deeply and will give more support.
Well, that brings me right to one of the things I noticed. I mean, right away, we've been hearing for years now that, wealth is transitioning to women, and you put that right up front in the book. We all know it's happening. So if organizations and even, women's schools are failing to engage women, how we know they're going to miss out on future gifts if this transition happens and they're not changing these behaviors you're talking about. I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about why it's key to start exploring and discovering what's going on in your organization and with the women who are your constituents before you implement some new program or launch a brand new initiative.
Well, this is really about behavior change. And, we go to these conferences, we read the books, we get new ideas, we come back really excited, but we can't think ourselves to the change we want. We can't just read and learn and assume we're going to be able to implement change. We have to put ourselves in the middle and become aware of what might be needed to make the change. The people, the behaviors, the new thinking. So that is exactly why I start with Discover. Discover is all about, you first start with understanding the research. So Women's Philanthropy Institute, as you know, Jen, has an amazing amount of research, and recently with the great funding from the Gates Foundation, Melinda Gates in particular, it's been on steroids. We're putting out 6-7 reports a year about how women give, and That is critical to know that we have quantifiable research that there are gender differences. Not every woman, not every moment, but in general, there are differences. So we have to give ourselves over to discovering that research and then grappling with it. I think discovery means grappling, untying knots, looking at things differently. So what are the implications of the research? You know, it's nice to read the research and you can put it down and that was a great infographic or that was a great tidbit. But for instance, if we had the research on women are more likely than men to engage the next generation, to engage their families, to engage their network, then so what's the implication of that? Are we asking about, do they want to include their family in this conversation and this gift? Are we asking if they want to bring their network into an event or to this potential of support? That would be a behavior change. That would be an implication. So looking at the research and then grappling with potential implications is a first place. Then, as you know, in the book, I say, well, also look at the data. If the national research says X, does your data say X? I had some person in a conference I did last week where I was talking about how single women, again, the research, outperform single men. And so I said, have you done a basic analytical review of single women in your database? One guy got up, ran out of the room, asked his team to do an analysis, came back 3 hours later. He was the VP. They were busily working away, I think, at the university, and said, my God, you're right. We're not paying attention to single women. They are outperforming 4-1, but we don't have a strategy for it. So again, looking at your own donor data to see if it reflects the research and also to see what guidelines it might give you, like that one, to pay attention to single women or to millennials or to the fact that women give more frequently but fly under the radar. And then a third piece of discovery is not just the national, it's not just your own donor data, but what do your stakeholders say? What do they care about? Why are they giving right now? What's resonating with them? What are they noticing? Because, by the way, we are paying attention as women. Are we seeing enough women in the communications? Do we see that the headlines are equal? Women's sports team wins as much as we're seeing men's sports teams win. I mean, we're paying attention. So what's your stakeholders' input about you, about your mission, about what they're giving, and what might motivate them to support even further? And the final piece, my biggest piece, which is how I started, we have to look at our own myths, our own biases. And we can talk about that forever, Jen. Maybe that's another question. But there's all of these discovery, what I call components, really help us take a step back, be curious. Because if we jump right into tactics, into action, we just carry forward our myths, our unconscious biases, this is what we do for all the other donors. It should work here, right? We just carry that stuff forward rather than pausing and reflecting and designing in ways that support women and what they resonate with.
Well, I can give you an example of that happening, and maybe you can help with how a researcher could move change forward a little. I mean, even
Cool.
when an organization says, yes, we need to look at this cohort of women. We know that they are our future major donors. They go to research and say, research, go forth and find them. Yeah, it's true. And then research
I
says,
get that.
here are some great women. We found them in our database. Maybe we found them outside our database. Here are the people you should invite to join your, startup initiative. And they get pushback. I was in a roundtable discussion once, and the woman said, I can't see the wealth. I can't see those hard asset numbers on her. And how do I make the gift officer believe it's a good prospect? So there's just exact example. Like we're so used to fitting an old mold. How do we reinvent that? How can a researcher talk about a prospect differently to a gift officer?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really great question, Jen. I love it. I think there's 3 things that we can start doing differently. The first is what you talk about. How do you persuade? So I would bring in the research directly. And for instance, an important piece of research for researchers to know is that across 12 charitable subsectors, women tend to give to 11 of them, i.e. we are spreading our giving, whereas men are just giving to 6 or 7. So it is harder to find the entirety of what a woman is giving. You also know the research that women are outperforming men in their gifts. If you were to add it all up, women are giving more. But when we're researching, and you know the fallacies of how we research and what's public and what's easy to find, right? When we're researching, we have to assume as researchers and as gift officers that we're probably seeing no more than 25-30% of all that she's interested in and giving to, and no more than 25 or 35% of the aggregate of what she's giving, just because we simply don't see it and can't find it as much. And what she's giving across the board tends to be, equal or smaller gifts, which add up to a lot. You might find a $10,000 donor. She might be giving $250 here and $1,000 there, and that doesn't look like big. But if you do the aggregate, she's giving $10,000, and all of a sudden you've got a new conversation about that donor. So that's the first thing: is blend the research about how women give with what the researcher is bringing forward. That perhaps there's some conversations to learn about all that she's giving and what she cares about. The second is looking at the potential bias of hard numbers. Literally, we know this from artificial intelligence. I think we know it from how algorithms are created for all the search engines we use, but they are wired towards men. They are designed towards men, not because they consciously chose to do that, but that's just how the best practices were put together and put into the math and then put into the algorithm. For instance, men tend to climb up a career ladder. Let's just call that the ladder approach. You have the ladder, you get the next job, you get the next title, and you get the next salary. And often that's more easily found, public. And so you can see hard numbers for men, and we get comfortable with that. Women tend to do what I call the jungle gym. We start our career, and then we may take a step back for children. We come back into our career and we go up, but we also may go for a lateral move, or we may move because something else is more giving us choice about how we can learn. We go back out, family reasons, elder care, we come back in. It is much harder to find information about women because of how we go in and out of our careers, and therefore our titles and our salaries. So again, persuasively, the researcher needs to tell the people, based on all I know about how now to research women, this is why these 5, 6 that I have found are important. And these are the questions that we should be asking to finally do the final qualification. And that brings up the third piece of, we have to assume we don't know everything. My gut, based on now how I know how to research, is this is a good one. And therefore, I want to partner with the fundraisers, and these are the 5 questions I would have the fundraiser ask. So there's just a different approach to persuasively convince people these are now women that we can pay attention to.
So what I'm hearing you say, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we can start with a piece of information that we can learn from the research, such as single women are outperforming single men, or that women are more likely to have a larger share of their assets in private, or that they like to give more gifts over time, smaller to more organizations, so we're less likely to see them all. Then we demonstrate on the second half of that sentence, and here's what I see with this prospect, so that we are defining that capacity rating. Because I'll tell you, when I work with people, even ultra high net worth individuals, we still, as researchers, struggle with the big numbers, and we want to revert to found assets and do a formula, and it's just way too conservative. So even there where we have the numbers, we're afraid to go higher. It's a big shift in behavior to say, here's a woman, we don't see a lot on her, but I see these 3 things, and I think you should ask 5 questions to discover if she really is a leadership prospect. That's like a big change.
That is a big change, but here's a place where we could do it more quickly. Another piece of research is that women are either part of the decision making or are the decision makers. So if we just flip our mentality that he gives more and flip it to she's at the table, if we just flip our assumption of who we're researching and start by researching the women, start by having fundraisers, always make sure the woman's at the table, or always finding out, is it his decision, her decision, or a joint decision? You move faster into the whole conversation. It's not so much on the researcher, but on all of us holding what is now quantifiable assumption that she's involved somehow. So let's make sure she's in the conversation.
And maybe we should just all get comfortable with being a little uncomfortable for a while.
True, very true. By the way, if we make all these adaptions, and I don't want to say all these, it's not as though there's that many. I'm a coach. I always tell people, just start with 5% more. Just try one thing 5% more times. You're going to see a change. So if we begin making these adaptations one step at a time, we are also what I call priming the pump, getting better at adapting behaviors now for women, because that's where the dollars are. Might as well start where the dollars are, but also for all the other diverse donors in our portfolio. African Americans are giving and have been for a long time, but they give differently. Latinas, Hispanics, Asian Americans. The wide diversity of donors all deserve our attention in new and adapted ways.
I am so glad you brought that up, because that, as I started to look at women differently in research, that's exactly what it appeared to me. Any minority, sort of falls down in the numbers because
right.
they're just different from our traditional. Well,
right.
I'm curious, as you were researching for the book and writing the book, what surprised you the most about women's philanthropy as you made that journey?
Really surprised me the most, and this was Kathleen Lair, having been in women's philanthropy since the mid-90s and knowing how much women care about making a difference in this world. And we've seen it across the ages, how women have been part of the social movements and carrying the burden in many, many, many ways. What really surprised me was how much untapped potential there is, simply because of the mismatch between our current fundraising behaviors and practices, which, by the way, were built, no right or wrong, just built on the prototypical donor of the time, so the 50s and 60s built for men. So that mismatch in how women prefer to give, it's that mismatch that is meaning that we are under receiving from women or not. We could be turning them off, dollars from women. Because all the stories I tell in the book of those universities and nonprofits that have begun to pay attention to women, almost to an institution, they have gotten more dollars more quickly than even they expected. I have story after story about how they set X goal and they blew past it, and then they set Y goal and blew past that too, because the women, once they're met the way they prefer, they bring themselves, they bring their talents, they bring their networks, they bring their families. Women care deeply, and being met as they resonate means we're opening up a wonderful well of amazing support beyond our imaginations.
That's great. Good stuff.
It's worth it, right? As you
Right.
talked earlier, all these adaptations, it's worth it. There's dollars there, there's support there that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
So we're going to have some positive reinforcement as we go along, changing our behavior.
Right.
That's good. So before I let you go, I wonder if you have any final tips or resources for fundraising researchers.
One is, it's in my book, but I just want to underscore it. When we do the discovery and we're looking at our donor data, people are more compelled by what we're missing right now versus what we could get if we start doing this. So the researchers and the analysts will often be the people that are in the data and looking at the single women, or looking at the millennials, or looking at women making more of the decisions, and we're not including them in the conversations. And there are dollars there. You can see that everyone who's done a data dive has seen the dollars that they're not getting right now today. I've had clients who said, we've got $3 million. I had one client who said, we've got $26 million. I've got one client who found $1 million, and they were only a $6 million organization. There's money right there in your database, but frame it as, this is what we're missing right now, because it gets the attention and moves people more into action because it feels more immediate. The second is to, as I said it earlier, but I just want to underscore that assume women are at the table philanthropically. They're either making the decisions or part of the decision. So just flipping that switch means we can be making sure that we're always including women in the research we're doing on the man, and that we're always putting women in a briefing when we put it together. And if there's not a woman, we would say, have not been able to find much on, quote unquote, her name. Don't just say wife or partner, but her name. And then hey, these are the questions we should ask, because based on research, we have to assume that she's part of these conversations. Like making overt the missing, if you will, also in the research and the briefing, rather than just saying, I can't find anything. The third is just assuming women have money. So much research that's in my book that's out there is women are earning more, they're investing more, and they're giving more. So just assume 2019 that women are holding their own money, earning their own money, and inheriting their own money. And therefore, with that much money, we have an opportunity to assume that they're philanthropic and we should be talking to them. So let's go find them.
Okay, there's a rally cry.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time today and your thoughts about women in philanthropy.
Most welcome. It's really fun to talk to you, and this is an important topic, so happy to come back anytime.
Great. That was Kathleen Lair, expert in women's philanthropy and nonprofit leadership coaching, and she's also a senior consultant at the Aspen Leadership Group. Kathleen was kind enough to provide an infographic on women's wealth and philanthropy, which you can download from the Learning Edge blog post or inside the Knowledge Seekers free membership at the Institute's membership learning community. At the Institute, we're committed to helping you achieve fundraising success with research. Check out the resources and our on-demand courses at www.prospectresearchinstitute.org. Until next time.